archives waiting to be discovered. Many questions about Olive are left unanswered in this book because most of Kokang's archival record has been either destroyed or classified. The Myanmar National Archives house the majority of the classified government records of Kokang from Olive's time in power, though many were destroyed. These were made partially available to me, but not as broadly as to now deceased Shan scholar Sai Kam-mong, a longtime lecturer at Mandalay University. Particularly records pertaining to Olive's arrest in Myanmar in 1962 remain secret. Chinese Communist Party records, other than the ones gazetted by government historians like Lu Chengwang in Kunming, are not available to the public. Though Olive was never a salaried employee of the so-called secret army, records at the National Archives of Taiwan contain a wealth of detail about many of Olive's trade routes. Many of those records were only recently declassified. The untold stories contained in these records may have benefited people at the CIA, who later modeled similar missions against undesirable regimes elsewhere in the world. 2 lessons, to be exact. Fact is stranger than fiction, and politics is local. A former employee of the CIA, who wished not to be identified, was able to confirm the existence of the agency's file for Olive. However, in response to a public information request for files relating to Olive, the CIA's public information officer responded that they could not confirm the existence or non-existence of files pertaining to Olive at the agency. Many have searched for Olive Yang like I did, and many fabulists have spun tales about the criminal seductress or power-crazed bandit. But what they may have learned from Olive's true story is that her motivations were more tragic than what they imagined. Chapter 1. The country formerly known as Burma. On a porch tucked behind a small mahjong parlor on the north side of Yangon, Olive Yang was enjoying a cigarette or two in solitude with a pot of green tea, watching the relentless evening squall that flooded the driveway to the compound. Olive was a lifelong insomniac and routinely sat up all night on the porch as old colleagues who passed through town came to pay respects. By morning, Olive was alone and rose to extinguish a final cigarette before retiring. It was July of 2009, in the middle of monsoon season, and when the day dawned, a shattering thunderstorm gradually gave way to spectacular pink and orange skies. It was so humid that filaments of mold had sprouted across the walls and floor, and while stepping on the glowing butt, Olive suddenly slipped on a slick and mossy, rain-soaked tile and fell hard, backward. The pain was immense. Olive was unable to get up and called for help. Initial refusals to see the doctor could not prevent the inevitable diagnosis. Upon returning from the clinic, it was clear that the 83-year-old had broken a hip and would require strict bed rest for weeks, maybe months. The caretaker purchased a wheelchair and started giving Olive sponge baths. Being unable to walk was torturous for someone like Olive, who once boasted the ability to traverse the length of the Salween River's thickly jungled caravan routes faster than any other man on horseback in the Golden Triangle. Now, so much as walking across the courtyard to the mahjong parlor was out of the question, never mind sitting for a game. Inconsolably cooped up, with a bum hip that was slow to recover and increasingly cumbersome to care for, Olive's mood plummeted as the weeks wore on. The caretaker learned to open the door slowly whenever he entered the room to clean the bedpan. Olive liked to vent frustration by hurling it his way. "Moron!" Olive would shout insults at him as he dodged flying filth. "I've been waiting hours!" So the caretaker wasn't sure what to expect some weeks later, when he went to Olive's room with a piece of upsetting news. The glorious ceasefire which Olive had negotiated nearly exactly 20 years ago was broken. Up in their ancestral homeland, Kokang, a few hundred miles north, there had been a violent drug bust. Following a tense standoff, government troops had raided a very heavily guarded weapons and narcotics factory there, fighting their way in with mortars. Clashes were ongoing. It was the end of a prosperous peace that had lasted 2 decades. Small pieces of the Yang legacy in the world were disappearing. Olive had ruled that land before. The factory